I don't understand the innocence part. Like, you're outside the Capitol on January 6th. Now, we all saw what happened, like this massive attack on the Capitol, officers getting beaten up, windows broken, people breaking down doors.
Smoke is going up in the air.
I mean,
people are climbing up the Capitol, waving Trump flags.
So unless you are legally blind and legally deaf, how is it that you went into the Capitol after that innocently? I don't understand this.
We're here with part 2 of Tuesday's Bulwark Podcast. It's Will Saletan, my friend and yours. Stephen Richer, what a great guy. I mean, if we only had more Republicans like Stephen Richer, if you're a Democrat, you've never supported anybody, he's got a re-election campaign. If you've never supported a Republican before, what better time? What better time to make your first one ever, Stephen Richer? You can just give him $1 just to say you did. He's running for re-elect as Maricopa County Recorder. We need people like him in public service. Will, what'd you think about our buddy Stephen?
I love Stephen, and I love him for standing up. And I one of the things that I think is really important in our country is it's important that the people who stand up against the Kari Lakes and the Donald Trumps, the liars, all the corrupt Republicans, are not all libs. Okay, it's important that people see the difference between being an honest conservative, because part of the Trump Kari Lake agenda is to convince normal Republicans that they have to choose between liberals and election liars, election deniers. And so Stephen Richer stands up, and people like him, Brad Raffensperger, Rusty Bowers, and they say, nope, I'm conservative and I don't believe in these lies.
He also speaks clearly and plainly, which I like. You know, he's speaking plainly about Kari Lake being a liar. You know, you could do legal talk. A lot of times you have politicians. A lot of times I think particularly Democratic politicians, a lot of times talking a lot of frou-frou talk. And there's no bullshit from that guy. Okay. For those that are just listening on audio, Will has changed into a Houston Rockets hat, so we can just kind of have a little NBA chat here. Houston Rockets, I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs. They're playing pretty well, though. I want to play a little audio for you of Mike Johnson, the anti-Stephen Richer, if you will, our Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, recently talking about January 6th.
Originally, we were trying to blur some of the faces to protect the innocent, people who were just there and just happened to be walking through the building.
Yeah, so that was his priority. Mike Johnson's on an apology tour. I want to hear you've been monitoring his apology tour, but before we get to kind of the substance of what's happening in Congress, this was part of it. He's on with Eric Bolling on Newsmax there, and talking about releasing the tapes, all this bullshit about January 6th. They're secret tapes, who knows? And he wants to, but before they released them, he wanted to make sure that their priority was blurring the faces of the insurrectionists so that nobody else got into trouble.
Right.
Law and order. Will, what do you think about that?
So, okay, I understand the distinction between people who have committed violence on January 6th and those who were in the Capitol not necessarily committing violence. Here's what I don't understand, Tim. I don't understand the innocence part. Like, you're outside the Capitol on January 6th. Now, we all saw what happened, like this massive attack on the Capitol, officers getting beaten up, windows broken, people breaking down doors.
Smoke is going up in the air. I mean, people are climbing up the Capitol, waving Trump flags.
So unless you are legally blind and legally deaf, how is it that you went into the Capitol after that innocently? I don't understand this. So I can understand the idea that you weren't protesting for Black Lives Matter. You were protesting for Donald Trump and trying to overthrow democracy. But I don't see how that's a defense. So that doesn't make you innocent. So I don't get where Mike Johnson's coming from.
I do. I get where he's coming from. This is a religious thing now. Like they are the martyrs. Like they need to protect and defend the martyrs, and that is the ante now to enter the Church of Trumpism. But I don't. It'd be one thing. I would be sympathetic to this view if it was like there was closed footage from like around the Washington Monument, and somebody wanted to release video of people like leaving after the rally, like going away from the Capitol. We wouldn't want to show their faces. That's fine. But inside the Capitol? Okay. No, sorry, Mike Johnson. All right. This tour, though, what you called an apology tour when we were messaging earlier, which I liked. A lot of media. Obviously, he's very concerned about being able to manage his conference right now. He's trying to quell the uprising from MTG. We have one more little bit from Mike Johnson. Let's listen to that, and then I'm interested in you to kind of give us a view of what you've seen from him in these interviews over the last few days.
So here's what happened. So because the shutdown would be so terrible, we fought on the appropriations bills. We I was hemmed in by the top line spending numbers that my predecessor negotiated. Okay, I inherited all this because I remember I was after the end of the fiscal year. They handed me the reins of the stagecoach going off the cliff.
Yeah, okay. So he's on the tour. He's fighting. But he fights Will, and he is not like that blow-dried Kevin McCarthy. That predecessor hemmed him in. He's been fighting. What have you seen from Mike?
So, first of all, you remember when in the State of the Union, Biden kept saying my predecessor, and Republicans went ape over this? They went completely nuts, like, you don't do that. You don't blame your predecessor. And then what happens? The guy who literally sat behind Joe Biden during the State of the Union and complained about him blaming his predecessor is blaming his predecessor. So what Johnson's saying is he's going out there to right-wing talk radio and right-wing TV. And he's got a lot of buddies. He's got a lot of friends. Sean Hannity, Eric Bolling, all these guys, or Charlie Kirk. They're all trying to help Mike out, trying to say, hey.
They want hardball interviews?
They're trying to assure their listeners who think that Mike Johnson, with his 1 vote majority or whatever it is, 3, can sort of ram the conservative agenda through America. They're trying to like reconcile them, explain to people. So Mike, tell our listeners why you can't do this. So he's out on the tour saying, hey, Kevin McCarthy hamstrung me, right? I had to cut this deal for the CR for extend funding for all this stuff. I'm operating with a really small margin. He says he uses a football metaphor. He's like, I can't throw a Hail Mary on every play. We need, 3 yards and a cloud of dust, get the first downs, move the ball. He used the word incremental.
He doesn't look like a big football fan to me. People can read
Waterboy
between the lines on that.
I think he'd be a good water boy, don't you think?
I don't know. I think that he was probably in the drama club, but that's maybe for another day.
And one of my favorite little shticks he's got is he's being a good. He's a Southern Baptist, right? He's promising the Republican base a kind of heaven. So you know how the idea of heaven is, things are really bad in this world, but just be patient. Don't ask for too much, because in the next world, everything's going to be cool. So Mike Johnson's version of heaven is he's telling all these guys, right now, just bear with me while we don't get much of what we want, because we don't have enough of a majority. And after the election, everything's going to be wonderful. He says, Donald Trump's going to be president. We're going to have a much bigger majority. We're going to have the Senate, and all good things will come to you, right-wing Republican base, after the election. If you just be patient with me and please, withdraw your motion to vacate. So that's his spiel.
What? How did Ukraine come up much in these interviews? Like, what's your sense? We were talking to Bill Kristol yesterday. He's a little bit more bullish. Joe Perdico, Man on the Hill, has been very bearish on anything getting done. Any sense of that, or what were these softball interviews kind of avoiding that the touchier topic?
So Eric Bolling did bring up a Newsmax interview. Did bring up Ukraine. And because this is like an independent thing, let's set aside all the spending stuff. We don't want money going to Ukraine. We don't want money going to Ukraine before the border. And of course, remember, Republicans had the deal on the table, and they said, we don't want this border agreement that Lankford negotiated in the Senate. And so there has been no movement on Ukraine. So Johnson has been. Bolling asks Johnson, have you been actually negotiating with the Democrats to pass funding for Ukraine? And Johnson sort of dances around it, which we can probably agree means he is going to do it. And so Johnson's sales pitch to Bolling and his audience about Ukraine is, we're doing this differently from the way the Democrats did. We're going to do it in loans rather than, a grant, rather than just giving them the money. We're going to use this Repo Act to seize assets from Russian oligarchs to pay for it. We're going to unleash American energy to hurt, the Russian gas industry and hurt the war effort. So he's trying to prepare them for, we are going to send some money to Ukraine, but we're going to do it in a Republican, macho, conservative way.
I hope so. Bill and I talked about this yesterday. I'm wondering your take on it. Like, I sometimes feel like a hack when I have to bring this stuff up, but it's just reality. Like, the Democrats don't get any credit for this. Like, isn't it pretty crazy that like we live in this world where the Republicans can make these random demands about funding and equipping our allies in Ukraine, and there's not even any worry that the Democrats are going to push back on it. Like, the Democrats are just being responsible. Many of the Democrats are not exactly, not everybody's Jake Auchincloss over there. Not everybody's excited about the military-industrial complex, right? There's some Democrats that have legitimate concerns about the way that, our defense budget is spent. And yet, no peeps Like they're all just like, all right, whatever, bullshit you assholes need to come up with to provide cover on this, we'll go along with, and Joe Biden will sign it.
Right.
And I do just wish that they would get some credit for that, like with with anybody. I don't know. It's not like I don't know what I'm hoping for. That Brett Baer is going to say, "Good on Joe Biden, standing up to Vladimir Putin and doing horse trading." But it is true, right? Am I wrong?
I should ask you about this because, that's the way I look at it, and I wonder how it works in politics. Because it seems to me, Tim, that priors are so built in that people just refuse to see that what used to be the conservative party isn't anymore, and vice versa, right? I mean, here Mike Johnson goes around on this apology tour, and he tells people, "Okay, I don't have a lot to show you, conservative base, but we're standing for all the values we believe in." And he rattles it off like limited government, strong foreign policy, border security. Meanwhile, what's happening in reality? Like they reject the border security bill. Let's leave the border open for another year until Trump gets in, right? And family values is a joke. The limited government, they spend as much as the Democrats do. That was Nikki Haley's point. And on foreign policy, exactly what you said. The Republicans are now the isolationist party, right? Yeah. They're the ones who don't want to support our allies, and yet they somehow claim credit for it, and it's not clear that voters in the middle are going to punish them for that.
No, or even aware. It's not clear they're even aware. Anyway, I don't know exactly maybe how to message this. This is something for my conversation with Sarah. Me and Sarah are doing the secret pod this week on Friday for people who aren't Bulwark Plus members. Maybe me and Sarah will hash this all out. But how do you message this so the Democrats can get some credit in the big middle for being willing to give up? They still have this reputation for going so far to the left and giving in to the left. And they have in various times. We've discussed that. But on a couple of major issues this year, immigration, which we just talked about with Stephen, and Ukraine, they're willing to sacrifice in order to make a deal. And it's the Republicans that won't. Okay. A couple other topics here we gotta get through. I'm so excited about all these. I don't know which one to start with. Let's start with anti-white discrimination. How about that? We're concerned the Trump administration, Project 2025, they're starting to put a little meat on the bone about what their plans are if they get in. And one of the big efforts is going to provide protection for victims of racism. It's interesting. White people, though. It's when white people are victims of racism. They're going after the Rooney Rule. We've been talking about the NBA. Here's some NFL chat. The Rooney Rule is how NFL teams, the league requires them to interview a black coaching candidate. Was trying to deal with the fact that in a league that's mostly black players, all the coaches were white. Seems like kind of a reasonable rule. They want to look at instances where the government is giving money to black farmers, for example, to kind of block that. That's it should be the money should go to farmers equally, no matter what their race is, etc. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, both the substance and the politics of this. I'm concerned about this. I think that we're going down a very bad road here. And I think that a lot of the motivation of the right now is concerns about reverse racism. I think a lot of times the left plays into that. And so I think this is going to be a very potent political thing, even though I find it obviously ridiculous as a policy matter. Where do you stand on that?
Well, since unlike a lot of folks at the Bulwark, I was born a Democrat and came in, grew up in the Democratic Party. I've always looked at the Republican. This is before Donald Trump. Yeah, I feel like Republicans have always had a white grievance angle. Whatever it is, it's Jesse Helms and, you needed that job or whatever. I mean, this has been going on my whole life. And so I feel like the Republican Party has a lot to answer for here. On this particular thing, though, going after the Rooney Rule, think about this for a minute, Tim. This is not even we gave the job to a non-white person instead of a white. It's not like
it's a job.
This is like
they just get an interview. All they do is they get an interview. Binders full of black coaches is all they're doing.
So the piece in Axios that went into this was really good, and it talks about this group, America First Legal, which is Stephen Miller, the Trump outfit, and they literally sued. They filed a civil rights complaint against the NFL over the Rooney Rule. Again, the Rooney Rule just says you've got to interview, not even give the job to. Interview two minority candidates. You can interview, and the complaint was, but that takes time. It takes time, and any time you spend interviewing a non-white person comes away from a white person. That is a level of extremism in defense of, I don't want to say white supremacy because that's an incendiary term, but like you're not even allowed to make an effort to try to diversify your staff, your coaching staff. And how far does this extend? Because there's these interviewing rules they're used in corporations, they're used in other political offices, and it's just like the mildest form of let's try to get outside our white bubble. And for them to be sued over that, just to me testifies to the extremism of this white grievance movement, and certainly under the Trump era. The other one, can I just say one other one about Trump?
Please.
Donald Trump, they mentioned this in the Axios piece. Donald Trump has been out there claiming that Letitia James and Fani Willis are racists for prosecuting him, right? And there's no evidence other than that they're black and he's white. And if that's his standard of what counts as racism, then that means like no white person, even one as patently guilty as Donald Trump, can ever be prosecuted. So I just think that's gross.
I do too. I find it gross and I find it extreme. I will also say I think this is something that we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about on this podcast. It's something that I'm very concerned about is how this is perpetuating this sense of grievance outside of environs where they're actual far, like outside of the Jesse Helms type world, right? And into kind of mainstream white America. One thing that really stuck with me, I was watching, did you ever watch the show White Lotus?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in the first season of White Lotus, I guess it's a rich family. They're at a Hawaiian resort, and the whole thing's kind of a commentary on white privilege, et cetera. But there's a scene, they're sitting at breakfast at this resort in Hawaii, and the mom, the white mom, rich mom, is talking about how she has a daughter and a son. The daughter's doing great, and the son isn't, right? And I forget if he's going testing for colleges or for or internships. I forget the exact context, but her complaint is, he's not going to get the same fair shake, like he's getting discriminated against, right? There are going to be black people or women or whatever are going to be ahead of him in line now. And like the character in the show, obviously they're making fun of the character in the show in this, but I'm telling you, like how much this is starting to perpetuate among people. Like this mom character was not like a MAGA character, right? It was, probably if you're guessing who the character voted for, probably Hillary and Biden, right? And yet she has that thought. And I'm concerned about this. And I'm concerned that the MAGA crowd is going to really use this wedge and that it's something that's going to persist after Trump.
So one little piece
if
of
we have
punditry here.
Trump.
I'm going to give you. I have a couple of ponies over my shoulder. I'm not even going to grab one here because this is not a real pony. This is like a pony. It's a Trojan pony because inside the pony is some more bad news. I don't think that's going to happen yet, and the reason is that the Trump people have found they need a scapegoat, and they want to tell American white people who they need a scapegoat for what's wrong with you. It can't be some corporation or whatever. And so right now it's immigrants. As long as they got immigrants, they're not going to go to domestic non-white people. What holds them to that is that Trump is doing better with Hispanic and black voters than he has been. I think than like Mitt Romney, right? So as long as those people are inside the Trump, enough of them are inside the Trump coalition, then he has something to lose by hyping this too much. But that's only true as long as he's got the immigrants to blame. If at any point the immigrants are not a sufficient scapegoat, he'll go after domestic non-white Americans.
Boy, that was the pony. We're in trouble.
Like I said, a Trojan pony.
I kept waiting for the real pony. I kept waiting for the Pegasus to fly over and give a more positive view. Okay, I agree with that. I don't know that that's much of a pony. Definitely a Trojan pony. All right, I want you to be the House Lib. And we're running out of time. So to be the House Lib, would you like to talk about abortion? We have a great Mark Caputo article everybody should read this morning. There's a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. Supreme Court has now ruled there'll be a ballot initiative to essentially repeal that 6-week ban that has been upheld. And then you also are working on a longer, kind of looking into the Republican position about the U.S. having a blank check on Israel. So I want to give one of these two topics the time they deserve rather than being rapid fire. So where would you want to be the House Lib on Israel or abortion?
Let's go to abortion. Let's go to abortion.
Okay, great.
Because
next week we'll do Israel next week.
We'll do another Caputo's got a great piece about what's going on in Florida, and this is really significant. It's certainly significant in Florida, but I think it's going to be significant larger. The Supreme Court of Florida has set things up in the fall for maximum pro-choice backlash, maximum pro-choice turnout, which is the Supreme Court of Florida said the 15-week ban can go into effect. The 6-week ban that DeSantis signed is then going to go into effect. And third, the Supreme Court said you can have this ballot initiative. It's going to be on the ballot in the fall to reinstate basically Roe. I mean, it's going to allow abortion up until viability, essentially. And there's going to be a massive turnout because if you're in Florida and you're pro-choice, the Supreme Court of Florida isn't going to defend you anymore as it used to. The Supreme Court of the United States isn't going to defend you. You've got to get out and turn out for it. And I think the Marks cited polls that it's like 70% for this ballot initiative, which is not surprising. And Tim, I don't even have to be the House lib on this because this is going to get the libertarians turning out and voting for this ballot initiative. Okay. A little background. Ron DeSantis has been bragging for years that he changed voter registration in Florida, and Mark Caputo has in the Bulwark piece some data on this. Florida used to be a plus 700,000 Democratic registration, and it's moved completely the opposite. It's now like plus 800,000 Republican, right? But who are those people, right? Those people are the ones who came to Florida because they wanted freedom. Remember COVID and like, you come here, you don't have lockdowns, your kids can go to school, nobody's going to make you get vaxxed, nobody's going to make you wear a mask. Those are libertarian Republicans. Though you're going to tell those people that the government, which can't tell them to get vaxxed, can't tell them to wear a mask, can tell them whether they can get an abortion. So there's going to be a big turnout of people who are in the middle, who are libertarian for this ballot initiative. Don't know if it's going to help Democrats, but it's going to be a big win for abortion rights.
This is the big challenge the Democrats have, and is it worth fighting over Florida about this? This is where I'm going to rain on the pony here because I agree with you. I agree with that assessment. I think that a ballot initiative such as this almost certainly passes because the coalitions are such that there's a big percentage of Trump voters that are pro-choice, right? Like this is something that people don't understand, right? Like there's a lot of Trump voters that were not in it for the Supreme Court deal. Like he managed to create a fusionism like by accident, I think, like bringing in these kind of secular working class folks and doing the deal with the evangelicals on the Supreme Court. So the question is, do the folks go and vote that are coming out, and do they vote for Joe Biden? Do they vote for Democrat? Do they vote for whatever Democrat ends up winning the nomination against Rick Scott in the Senate race? And I just don't know. I don't think so. And I think that the way to do it conceivably is to try to message to those people that your vote today on abortion could be voided by the federal Congress, right? Like by Congress and the Supreme Court, right? Like you could vote today to reinstitute Roe in Florida, and then you could put in place Donald Trump, Mike Johnson, and whoever takes over Mitch McConnell, and they could pass a national abortion ban. Like that's not insane. Like that's not. It's kind of hard to imagine 60 Senate votes for it, but it's not totally implausible. If Republicans had a big landslide year, for example, and so how can that message sink in with some of these voters? I just don't know. We've seen this in Florida before. Florida had a minimum wage ballot initiative on the same ballot that Ron DeSantis won in a record landslide, and the minimum wage increase passed. Right. So, is there any, how do you get the policy and the partisan preference to match up? It's tough because the culture stuff a lot of times overtakes it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, part of what Caputo captures in this piece is that Trump is getting out of the way of this thing, right? Trump knows Trump is sticking. So there's a 15-week ban that was passed earlier in Florida, then the 6-week ban. Right. World of difference between these two things. Sure. Like just numerically, less than 10% of abortions are
6 is absurd. Even somebody like me who has pro-life sympathies, like 6 weeks is absurd.
Yeah. Like 60% of abortions, 60 to 65% are after 6 weeks. So you're cutting them off. You're making abortion illegal in Florida. Yeah. And what Caputo does, he tries to find out what's Trump's position, and Trump is not saying anything. He's sticking to that 15, 16 weeks, which is politically safer. I don't know if it's safe, Tim, but it's certainly safer. But it goes to your point that by doing that, Trump is going to minimize and possibly save himself and down ballot people in Florida, down ballot Republicans, from the pro-choice backlash.
We will see if that will be successful. Will Saletan, thank you so much. We're going to put this in the show notes here. Will's up for an award, the 28th annual Webby Awards for the corruption of Lindsey Graham. It's in the category of limited series. The corruption of Lindsey Graham was awesome. If you guys didn't ever listen to that, if anybody didn't listen to it, go back. It's on YouTube. It's in the archives here. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Go on there, vote webbyawards.com, vote for Will Saletan. He deserves a pony and I don't know. What do you get when you win a Webby? I don't know. Is there a little trophy? You can put it next to the pony? I don't know.
You might get some oddly shaped piece of plastic. I don't know.
All right. You need oddly shaped pieces of plastic. You deserve an oddly shaped piece of plastic. Will Saletan, thank you so much. We'll be talking to you again soon. We'll see you all back here tomorrow. I've got a fun guest for you, so make sure to tune in. Peace.